I want to talk about super because the government really had a crack at the Nationals last week for spending question time defending millionaires. They said, you know, you represent 70% of the most poorest electorates and you're still talking about these super changes. But what's your defence to that? And do these super changes affect the family farm?
Yes, they do, because farmers might be asset rich, but they're cash flow poor. And as a former agribusiness banker that used to surround farmers' kitchen tables, I can tell you that. And one of the vehicles in which they try to move through and to bring young people back to agriculture, otherwise Stephen Jones won't enjoy the food on his table and the clothes on his back unless we have the next generation farmers coming through. One of the mechanisms was for farmers to put their property into self-managed super funds, which under rules that the Labor Party started with superannuation and we support, was to actually allow for these farmers to be able to do that, to be able to have succession planning. But what that means is this perverse outcome that they put in place now is that they're going to tax farmers on paper gains, so that when they revalue their property, they'll pay the tax on the increase in value on that, even though they haven't realised it. Now, who does that? That just is a slippery slope that this mob is going down, that every year a farmer will, and even a small business owner that might own their own factory, that will have to get it revalued, and the gain on that will be taxed. That without realising the asset. How do you pay for it? It's this thing called cash, Stephen Jones, and it just goes to show that Anthony Albanese and the rest of the Labor government live in ideology, not the practical world of the people who make the money for this country, that have lawfully done the right thing and then had the rules changed on them. That's not the Australian way, and that's what this government has done, and particularly to the agricultural sector, to now say, well, we might have got this wrong, we're going to have to go back and look at this. I think Stephen Jones might eat his words. The National Party is standing up for you, the Australian consumer, and making sure that you're able to afford food and fibre every day of the week, and the only people that can provide that to you are Australian farmers.
Okay, let's talk about the New South Wales election campaign trail, because that is certainly heating up. We saw the Liberal Party launch yesterday. You're heading to New South Wales today. What did you think of this kind of future fund for children? Essentially, the government putting money into piggy banks for kids. Labor said no, they're not going to support it because essentially it affects richer families. Is that true?
Well, I think I'm not going to give gratuitous advice on state policy, but I think we need to understand that there's only so much of Australian taxpayers' money that can go around, and we need to prioritise that, and that's about making sure we get the basics right. So as I was out up in New South Wales 2 weeks ago. Well, I'm not over the detail of it, so I'm not going to give gratuitous advice, but what I did hear while I was on the ground was about the cost of living pressures that families were hearing as I'm heading to Wagga today and then into Cooma and places around New South Wales, as well as their roads. They want their potholes fixed, and what the National Party did was bring some common sense to this at a state level. They put $1 billion into fixing potholes. And I just say to the federal government, if you matched it, it'd go a long way to those roads and saving lives and making sure that we can get that product onto people's plates a lot quicker. So look, the New South Wales government is trying to face up to a challenge that many states have. Probably they're more acute in terms of young people getting into housing. We're all trying to address that. One of the ways I think they should also turn their mind, along with local government, is about the planning pen, about making sure that they can get stock into the system quicker, because if you increase supply, you reduce prices.
Just one final one. We just had Matt Cunningham back on the show with some breaking news that the president of the CLP is in fact quit because their formal opposition to The Voice, saying that doesn't seem it's not reflective in his view of what the electorate wants, including Aboriginal people. What do you say to that?
Well, everyone has their own view on The Voice. Ours is one of respect, but one of genuine intent to close the gap, and adding another layer of bureaucracy to the already 1,000 Indigenous representative bodies to Australian government at the moment will not close the gap. Okay. Practical measures about how the bureaucracy works, better bureaucracy, not bigger bureaucracy, what will close the gap. And that's why the Nationals took our position, because we represent those communities that are most disadvantaged. Many of the ones in the cities, that the opportunity of disadvantage disadvantage is being addressed, but it's in the remote areas that the Nationals represent that we've had this view. But there's no malice in our position. We want a respectful debate. There are people in our party that don't support our position, but there are many that do, and that's a good thing. And have diversity in politics. And I suspect if you ask some of those Labor right people, they're probably with us. They probably see that the Nationals actually are talking some common sense on this one, and they'd like to be able to express that view, but aren't able to because of the rigid nature of the Labor Party, and they'll be disendorsed. We don't do that in the National Party. We actually celebrate diversity. We celebrate diversity of ideas. We come from it from different directions. Because we have that diversity, we get better policy outcomes. We bring common sense to Canberra. That's the National Party way. Okay, we'll see how this by-election goes. It might give us a bit of a litmus test in the Territory to see where this is all at. As always, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.